All right, how's everyone doing here? Come on, sit down. Some more Gen AI for you today. All right, before we start, a quick poll for everyone here. How many people here use ChatGPT at least 30 minutes a day? Yeah? More than an hour a day? More than 2 hours a day? Wow. And what would you say you use it for beyond, say, work, just in your personal life? Shopping? Hands? Have you used it for shopping yet? Researching? Excellent. All right. Well, let's get into it. So first, let me introduce my panel here. Brianna?
Hi, I'm Brianna Cifelli. I'm the Senior Director of Retail Media at Jellyfish.
Lauren?
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Schiavone. I'm the founder of Wonder Consulting, an AI-forward consultancy where I train and advise brands on Gen AI. And prior to this, I was at Procter & Gamble for 16 years across insights, brand management, as well as e-commerce.
I just accidentally walked in. One of the prior panelists was talking about Second City. I thought this was going to be a stand-up. But as a failed comic, I chose this next best profession, which is data and analytics. And so my name is Ram. I run all product and analytics for Horizon Media's commerce unit called Night Market. And I've had the pleasure of sitting both on the brand side and the services side. Prior to this role, I was a CMO of a large brand. So glad to be here, and thank you for putting up with me.
Thank you guys for coming. So we have a good session here today. I'm sure you have all heard a lot about Gen AI in the last, actually today and the last year or so. But today we're going to be talking about something really that's very important, that touches every single person in this room. And it doesn't matter where you sit in the marketing world, if you're on the publisher side, agency side, consultant side, it's understanding consumer behavior and how that's changing, how the path to conversion is changing. The purchase path is collapsing. Search is changing fundamentally faster than we've ever seen before. For myself, about 5 months ago, I bought a house, and I'm a smart home enthusiast, and I packed up all my smart home stuff from my previous house, and I wanted to up my game in my new house. So I downloaded my entire Amazon purchase history, something you can do. You can actually request a data dump and get that. And I asked ChatGPT's deep research function to analyze all the smart home stuff I have, noting that probably if it's older than a year and a half, I may not still have it. And then to recommend how I could enhance my setup. And it went into deep research. About 30 minutes later, delivered about a 14-page report. This is what I have, this is what I could add, this is what it would cost. And from there, I was able just to go and shop on Walmart, shop on Amazon, and get the things I needed. And now I have a really cool smart house. In one word, change all the lights and colors. But think about if you're on the other side of this fence, if you're trying to sell to a person like me. Before, what would I do? I would be following influencers and content creators who talk about smart homes and smart home devices, reading magazines, checking out websites, checking out reviews on retailers of smart home devices, seeing if I liked them, if I think they would be part of me. So when you go into what I call the tunnel of AI, where you can do kind of all of your research there, and then you come out the other end, that's going to fundamentally change what every single person does in this room. And I know you all have seen the writing on the wall, and hopefully what we can find out with our expert panel is maybe some ways that you could think about this and approach your job and our mission to reach consumers better. So let me start with Lauren here. Talk about the Gen AI-powered customer journey, and where does media show up in it?
So the path to purchase is evolving really quickly, and that's being driven by AI. And there's many components for marketers to think about, but I'll highlight 3. First, as you mentioned, search is shifting. So Gartner expects that search will decline by about 25% this year as consumers shift their searches to products like ChatGPT. And what's interesting about that is that consumers trust these platforms. About 63% of consumers say they would trust a brand recommendation from an answer engine like ChatGPT. And consumers are going to go to these platforms not just to find out about products, but ultimately also to buy these products, as these platforms are integrating commerce capability and that full funnel capability. The second thing to think about is what I say e-commerce search will evolve to AI answers. So historically, consumers would sift through a lot of search results. And now in just a matter of seconds, you can get a custom personalized response. And as e-commerce leaders, you will shift your conversations from share of search to share of Rufus, right? And what's interesting about Rufus is for the first time, Amazon is going outside its own data sets and information and finding information offsite to ensure that Rufus is making the most relevant responses as possible. And then the third thing to think about is as we move from assistive AI to agentic AI, that means that AI agents will become shoppers. So now we not only have to design and optimize for shoppers, but we also have to design and optimize for agents. So if you are a leader on a brand, I think there's 4 things you need to be thinking about. 1, what is your brand visibility on these tools? Audit your brand. 2, understand how these platforms work. 3, experiment on them. And 4th, find a tool or solution to easily track and monitor your brand visibility on these platforms.
Yeah, and if you haven't heard the acronym GEO, that's like the SEO for generative engines. You know, can you influence the results? How can you become a source for this? Ram, you have some thoughts on where media fits in this?
So certainly. I think I'll probably echo some of the things, Lauren, you were saying, but in order to understand that question, we must first phrase the context. And what I mean by that is, if I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me to build something, right? It's the why behind it. Whenever somebody comes to you and say, I want you to build this algorithm, this solution, this optimization, the why behind the question always invariably goes back to, you're asking to make that job simpler for you. GenAI is something similar. You're taking, earlier if you were reviewing a search engine results page or you're looking at product, the onus is on you to make that decision. The onus is on you to filter and go through 8, 10, 12 choices, 5, and make a decision. The fundamental shift in response-based systems, autonomous decisioning systems, is they've done that for you. So when you have ShopGPT, ChatGPT recommending a product, you've narrowed down that selection choice. That is where, to answer your question, if you keep that context in mind, you have to realize that this will fundamentally change where advertising shows up in the path. Your message probably needs to be broken down in multiple pieces because that search is now conversational. It will not yield a result in one shot. There may be 5 queries, and you have to come back with 5 pieces of the response that tie together to affect that decision, because each unit is smaller. So, going back to your question, I echo some of the things that you mentioned about search behaviors changing. If you keep that in context, some of the places where it might show up is in the response itself. Some of the places where it may not directly show up in the response, you have to really take a hard look at your content, break it down to the benefits, to the features of the product, what content exists out there that can help the response present an option in your favor, and also accept the fact that the space on the top is now very narrow. You're no longer looking at a search results page with 10 options in there. You're probably vying to be in the top 2 contenders for that push for that query. So if you put it in perspective, it will result in some fragmentation of message. You have to choose what campaign targets what part of the answer, then choose a different ad format, and there will be some indirect exposure that will show up, and that typically shows up in the form of content that you're putting out there, in the form of reviews that people are putting out there, because now all of that can be assimilated in a high compute manner for that generative response to present your product.
It's crazy because for so long we've thought of maybe approaching consumer journey through funnel stages, top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel. I mean, you got to rethink all of this now when people can go, like I said, into the tunnel and get everything in one shot. Maybe, yeah, it's a conversation that lasts 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but all those things are changing so much. In fact, if you didn't see, OpenAI released a note last month that they reached 1 billion searches on their platform, which to me is like one of the big milestones that we should be paying attention to. I come from a search background, so the fact that it's changing things so quickly kind of scares me a little. Brianna, let's take the top of the funnel. So how will brands influence product discovery when GenAI is the guide?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to how people are searching. And I think people want to know what other people are saying about your products. We think about this as marketers all the time, and in retail media, we're always looking at reviews. How many reviews do you have? There's like 10,000 reviews. Who's gonna go through all of those? Some people might, I won't. So AI is right now, you see this on Amazon, it's summarizing reviews. People say, this works really well, this doesn't. And it makes it very clear what the product's purpose is, what people are saying about the product. And I started searching around on ShopGPT. I'm always shopping for something. But recently, I need a new vacuum because I just moved. So I was looking for what is the best vacuum. And the results that come up are always, people say this is the best vacuum for your budget. This is the best vacuum for pet hair.
That's true.
XYZ. So having the reviews is so important. And I think on top of that, you can't not mention the fact that you need to make sure that your PDPs have all of the right details on it. We're always saying this to our operations teams. Features, their titles and descriptions are up to date with all of the right assets, and you're constantly seeing what reviews are so you can update them.
And all this stuff's been written for people.
Yeah.
How, when, now you got to write for GenAI and for people. Ram, what do you think?
No, you were reading my mind. I was just going to build up on that. Just as an exercise, and I think some of you may have done it, to build on Brianna's response, right? 10,000 reviews. This is something we did. We have a platform called Neon. We do a lot of cool stuff there, but this is not about that. We did this exercise. So I asked the audience, take those 10,000 responses, either through an API or just feed it to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT's role to be a reviewer of that response and see what it comes back with. Compare that with what you're putting out on your product detail page. You'll be surprised how many times you'll find a distinct difference in the personality of what you're picking up in reviews versus what your product is saying. This didn't exist before. When you were doing traditional searches and meta optimization happened, and what you put out there on your content assets was what was getting indexed in search, it was getting fed back. Now we are living in an age where you can phenomenally see the difference. Just do it as an exercise, take your reviews, feed it to ChatGPT, ask it to give you a thematic extraction of keywords, of personality that reviews are showing, and compare it with your product detail pages. I promise you, you'll have some interesting finds.
It reminds me of when I was first doing SEO, when you then ask a spider or crawler to crawl your website to see how Google would see your website.
Right.
You're right, it sees it slightly different than how you think you're doing. And then, of course, for all of us that have ever written SEO copy, it's always half of it is for the engines, half is for the user, it's gotta be, and now you're saying not only does the content have to be recognizable by AI, but even agentic AI has to then read that and find it interesting.
You're relying on somebody else to make that choice for you, so you have to recognize how that person, in this case, a GPT transformer, is presenting your product.
So top of funnel, that's interesting discovery. What about middle funnel? I mean, that's really where AI shines, right? At the consideration level. You can go in, you don't even have to have a product in mind, you have a problem. And then if you're like me, or if you're like, I can imagine you probably asked, what are all the different options of a vacuum cleaner? And you probably had more than you ever even realized that are there. So at the consideration level, Lauren?
Yeah, here's one thing to think about. So you talk about crawlers. So these tools like ChatGPT, one of the #1 places they're going for product information is your brand website. Who has drastically deprioritized their brand website in the last few years, right? Most brands. And the other day I was auditing a brand and I went to their brand website and I was like, oh my gosh, this doesn't say anything, right? So as the first step, when you go home today, take a look at your brand website. Does it answer consumer questions? To Ram's point, does it answer top things that come up in consumer ratings and reviews? Because that, you can be sure, is a place that tools like ChatGPT are going to go for product information as they answer consumer questions.
Yeah, we've been looking into GEO for our website and for our business, and we've learned that there's very early best practices, and we don't really know what it's doing yet, but a lot of the SEO best practices, keyword, like you said, and certainly FAQs and answering questions, and you will start to see on our site soon probably an FAQ on every page, and then schema marked up in a way that then agentic
That's readable.
Yeah,
right? That's not in
readable.
a PDF format.
Absolutely. And then at the bottom funnel, that's what we're about to talk about. Because look, if GenAI was the disruption, then ShopGPT is like the King Kong or the Godzilla that's happening. When I saw the announcement, at first I had a kind of a shudder in my stomach and my heart, like, oh my gosh, this is all changing. But then, I thought to myself, look, we're marketers. We deal with market fluctuations. That's what we do. And the role of marketing is going to change, but it might even be more important. And talking to my panelists before this, getting ready for this panel, I think I learned a few things. And, for those of you, anyone not heard of ShopGPT, I would imagine everyone in this room has. But not just using GenAI to research and learn, but actually then buy from there. And I mean, you're talking about a dark tunnel. You go in with a problem, you have a conversation, you purchase without seeing anyone. And usually the path to purchase is rich. You might spend weeks or months deciding on a particular purchase, how you're going to purchase, sending off signals, watching certain videos, looking at certain products, which gives marketers signals to target and message in a really high way. So let's talk about brand, because I think that's the thing that we know is so important, and I think it will be more important. So if the ShopGPT model dominates and more of this happens, and it really becomes this tunnel where people go in without even realizing they're going to buy a product, and then they buy a product at the end, Ram, what role does brand play in a world where the assistants are making all these recommendations in this tunnel?
I appreciate that question. I think we've touched upon a few of those. I'll expand a little bit on that. So I think you're hearing from all of us. Reviews will matter. Content will matter. What do you say about your brand? What others say about your brand matter. And these are not just qualitative factors anymore. You can actually feed them into any GPT transformer and turn that into an optimization dimension, whether it's for a new version of creative, whether it's new version of messaging, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the things we've touched upon. In addition to that, this may not apply to every brand, but if you do the exercise of personality disconnect between your message and your brand, you have to realize that search is also changing. So I'll give you a simple example. There are certain brands who have such high brand awareness that they carry themselves. Those brands never have a need to put out content that says, why should I be buying this luxury product, or why should I be buying this shoe or this purse or what have you, because they're not feature oriented. Their brand carries themselves. But now pivot to this new generation, and somebody is trying to use ChatGPT or ShopGPT to say, what's the best product for me to buy? The response might turn towards a feature oriented search. My point here is, in addition to the dimensions that we're talking about, you have to realize that there may be, in your content, in your brand marketing initiative, in your brand messaging, there may be areas that traditionally you may not have needed to address. You have to put content out there for it. That's a gap. So that's one thing. And then the last thing I'll say is, when all of this is happening, there's also a component of measurement that is moving along with this. I am a big proponent. I've had my fair share of experience building core bid algorithms that power some of your biggest bid engines today. Along with it, so it's been a journey for me. Along with all of these marketing aspects, you also have to realize that measurement has to evolve. You can no longer ask for methods that will say, what is the contribution of this one factor, one campaign? Traditional MMMs will have limited viability. So my point here is, those would all be together, in my way of saying it, wrapped into a new consideration. All the marketing dimensions, and also realize that some evolution in ways of measurement also has to keep track of that.
For my media folks here, brand. How, does it go up? Is it more important in an AI world? Is it less important in an AI world? Is it the same? Lauren?
I think it becomes more important. I think the tactics will evolve, as Ram was mentioning, but ultimately the strategy remains the same, that you want to be top of mind for consumers, because the best thing you could do for your brand is have a consumer go in and do a branded search on ShopGPT, right, versus a non-branded search.
Yeah, and I just remember during the pandemic, and I remember one of the kind of stats that came out was the brands that were well known did better. You know, when you were looking for antibacterial soap or something, a brand that people knew, they would end up going after that and willing to pay more. We just did a consumer survey that's going to come out soon, 1,000 consumers, about some of the shopping deal events that are coming out this in the summer. And one of the questions we asked was, in an AI shopping assistant, if you were recommended the same product from a retailer that you knew, but it had a slightly higher price versus a retailer that you were unfamiliar with, which one would you rather go with? Resoundingly, 75% of people said they would go with the retailer they knew. And I think that's also going to be for brand too. So the brand is going to be even more important, because once someone goes into that tunnel and they start getting recommendations, when they see a brand that they know and recognize, it's just going to feel more real. We can't help from a human standpoint.
I think it's an excellent point too, because the study that you're talking about would probably bring to bear a quantitative validation of the point that we were all saying. That space up top is getting shorter, and consumers will make that choice as soon as they're presented with that choice. Because it does go back to, don't put the work on me. If there is a solution that makes it easier for me to jump on something, I'll do that. So I'll pay a premium to go to that brand because I already know them. The onus is now on us to be able to say, if we don't show up for these kind of searches, how do you make your brand go up there? Because to your point, JD, they will pay a premium. You're making the journey easy for them.
Yeah. And when we talk about content, so Brianna, how do media teams rethink some of the quote-unquote old ad formats? How do they rethink content strategy to influence GenAI outputs?
Yeah, so I think we talked about a lot of things and how AI is bringing everything together, but how are you measuring that or managing that? And there's probably a bunch of different tools. Jellyfish, we have a tool, Share of Model, which is a singular view of what AIs are saying about your brands. And this is really important to see what the customer sentiment is, what they're talking about, what they like or don't like about your brand, what is showing up. And that's that very valuable information to not only be able to use in your content strategy, but be able to use in your targeting and optimization strategy. Are you reaching the right audience? Are you targeting the right users? And then you can take those learnings too and put that in your ad assets. And we're probably going to see a shift in advertising assets, more focused on AI-generated advertising assets. But I think that those are really the key things to make sure that you're reaching the right audience.
Yeah. And you know, Lauren, in the GenAI-powered shopping journey, where should advertisers be placing their bets? We say things are going to change, but I mean, does that mean no one's doing search, no one's doing social, no one's doing retail media? Of course they are. But where does that mix, kind of, how do you think about that?
I think it's difficult to predict what the future is going to look like. So the bet that I would make is on agility, of being really lean, experimenting often, learning fast, and staying informed so that you're ready no matter what the business landscape looks like.
Yeah, and how do you think some of these, you deal with commerce media a lot, so how do you think that's going to change, other than some of the things we already talked about in terms of, you know, making it more available or ready for GenAI to?
I think it's going to be a mix of, this is also the part where I probably read out the disclaimer saying my responses might cause nausea, headache, dizziness, etc. But I think it's going to be some combination of newish things and what you're doing already. In other words, you probably already have systems in place, data in place that you're not necessarily fully utilizing for high compute methods. So simple things like you may have inventory data, you may have stock out data, chargeback data, you might have other things that are in the back house of the business that can be brought in for decisioning, so that your recommendations, you don't want to recommend a product which is not going to be available by the time somebody makes. So in order to address those things, there are certain things that GenAI is asking or is relying on us to implement, AKA use more of what you have. In addition to that, you probably should be looking at additional add-ons like we talked about, revising content, building in experimentation in your campaigns. You no longer have to run everything in an A/B format or ask for separate budget to run tests. There are now models built in AI that allow constant experimentation and correction. So you can move away from that age-old way of doing set aside 10% budget for an A/B test or what have you. So those are some of the things that you can bring anew, but I also want to emphasize that you already are sitting on certain pieces of data that can be used for decisioning that likely are not being used today.
To build on that, I think there's absolutely going to be new advertising formats and tools, and you're going to see advertising in places where it doesn't exist today. We are seeing signs of that. There is experimentation in AI, for example, on Perplexity, as well as within Rufus. So again, the best thing that you can do for yourself is to get into those tools, start to understand how that they work, so that when advertising is possible, you are ready and understand how the platforms work.
Do you have any thoughts about what that advertising could look like? I mean, and what teams would own that? Would it be a brand new team? Is it, any thoughts? Go ahead.
Go back to the table, the
Yeah.
retail versus the media.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead. That's a.
I think it's how companies think about who owns commerce media, right? Because ultimately these are becoming commerce players. And if they choose, wherever they choose to have that sit, I think it lives within there.
And I think if the announcement came in that, advertising is open at these places, I think a lot of marketers would be quick to jump on that, and you'd almost have to believe you'd have to at this point. And your clients would expect you to do that too, and to lead them into that new
I would also, and I don't know if I'm saying something that you'll agree with or it is controversial. I don't know that. I also think independent platforms and solutions have an opportunity to run a lot of what we're talking about, because decision making on what ad to serve when, whether it's a new ad format or it's a timing or a campaign being stopped or started or paused, a lot of that decision will move to decisioning systems. So to answer your question, I don't know if it's always going to be a human or a team. Maybe there's also systems that will make that decision for you. Platforms, tools might be able to run some of this for you as well.
So agents making decisions
Correct.
for agents that will be buying on behalf of agents. Just hit a button and the products just ship out.
I'm okay as long as any agent pays the bill. That's all I care about. I'm
Just
okay
send a
with
check and stop calling.
Yeah, just don't bill it to me.
All right, rapid fire. We're going to end up with some rapid fire here, and this is just more about AI, bringing it in-house, and how marketers can get better at this stuff. So quickly, Brianna, is Gen AI helping marketers make better decisions or just helping us make decisions faster?
Maybe controversial, but I think faster decision making. There's a lot of information that we know in our brains, whether that's new business strategies, new product launches, all these things that AI just doesn't know right now, but it's making our lives easier so that we can have AI answer questions like in Celeste to help with insights that we're able to focus on more strategic, higher level thinking.
Ram, what should market leaders be doing right now to prepare for what's coming with Gen AI in the next 12 months?
Leverage what you have and make it ready for AI. That's where a lot of evolution and things like MCP, et cetera, is happening. But use your systems to try to train and customize the responses, because as AI becomes more available, the onus will be on each brand to be able to train that AI to the data that you have.
And Lauren, if you had to bet on Gen AI in commerce media, what's your superpower and where do you invest today?
I think the superpower is figuring out how to leverage these Gen AI tools to accelerate your business growth. I think so often we think about them as productivity tools or making decisions faster, and instead think about how can you use them to accelerate your business, make your plans better, get richer insights, or simply find new business opportunities.
Right on. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for being here. And we'll end with one last poll. For those of you out there, please go ahead and shout it out. In a world where Gen AI is the new storefront, what skill will matter most? Raise your hand. What skill will matter most? Someone. Content creation. Yes, ma'am. Prompt engineering. Someone in the back. I see you trying to raise your hand. Go ahead. All right, a little shy here at the end. All right, thank you so much for coming, and keep on it.